I'm Nate Eaton, standing outside the Idaho Maximum Security Institution in Kuna. You can see this is the sign that people see when they drive up the road leading to the prison. It's right behind me. It was built in 1989. This is where Chad Daybell will spend the rest of his life. Now, we can't take our cameras inside, but we'll get a little bit closer. I'll tell you a little bit more about the prison and what happens to those people who are here on death row. Now, the Idaho Maximum Security Prison opened about 35 years ago. It houses the most disruptive inmates in the prison system. It can house about 550 people total, and there are two fences, a double fence here, both of them wrapped in razor wire, and there's an electronic detection system that runs through those fences. So it would be nearly impossible to get through those fences if you were trying to escape from the prison. Chad Daybell was brought here on June 1st, right after a jury sentenced him to death, and he is on death row inside of the prison, which is basically the 9 inmates currently on death row are in their own segregated area. They stay in their cell 23 hours a day. They have no contact with other inmates. They're not able to freely come and go from a pod. They are basically in their cell. They do have 1 hour where they can get out to get a little bit of exercise. The other inmates on death row with Chad Daybell include Azad Abdullah. He's convicted of first-degree murder for the arson death of his wife in Ada County. Thomas Creech, who was recently in the news as they tried to execute him earlier this year, but they could not get an IV. He's been on death row since January 1983. Timothy Dunlap was received into death row in April of 1992. He's convicted of first-degree murder for killing a woman during a bank robbery in Caribou County. James Hairston, he was booked here back in 1996, convicted of first-degree murder for 2 shooting deaths in Bannock County. Eric Hall, he was here, booked here in 2004 in October, convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder for raping and killing 2 women in Ada County. Gerald Pizzuto, he's been on death row since May of 1986, convicted of first-degree murder for beating 2 people to death. Jonathan Renfro, he has been on death row before Chad Daybell, the most recently admitted person on death row, in November of 2017, convicted of first-degree murder for the shooting death of a police officer. Now, there is one woman on death row who is actually in the Pocatello Women's Prison. She's not here in Kuna. Robin Rowe was booked and received into the Pocatello facility in 1993. She's convicted of first-degree murder for the arson deaths of her husband, son, and daughter in Ada County. And again, Chad Daybell joins those other people who are on death row, and he will remain in his solitary cell until a death warrant is issued. Now, that can take decades. As you heard me read the years from some of those other inmates, he could be in there for the next 20, 30, possibly 40 years. But once all of the appeals have been exhausted, a death warrant is issued. Idaho then immediately moves him from the facility behind me into what's called the F unit. And this is what it looks like. This is where inmates go as they wait to die. And when that death warrant is issued, the state of Idaho has 30 days to execute him. There's a cell in there where Daybell would be kept. There's a place for attorneys to meet. And then when the execution date actually arrives, assuming that he will be executed by lethal injection, this is the room where it will occur. These are photos provided to us from the Idaho Department of Correction. This is the bed where Chad Daybell will lie on, and they will put that IV in his arm. And then there are witness rooms for victims if they wish to witness the execution, for attorneys, for members of the media who can witness the execution. And all of this happens in this one building, this F unit, which, if you think about it, because there's so few people on death row and so few executions happen in the state of Idaho, this building is hardly ever used. This is the sole purpose of this facility, to take care of executions, and because executions don't happen a lot here, this building sits empty for most of the time. But Chad Daybell will not visit that building for quite some time, unless he should decide to waive all of his appeals. But we already know that that's not going to happen, at least in the first process, because John Pryor has already filed at least 1 appeal. So this is the facility, the Maximum Security Prison. Again, cameras are not allowed inside. Around 550 people could be booked into the facility, and they could stay in there. Some will never leave these walls. They will be here the rest of their lives. They will never see outside of these highly secured fences. Others will serve their prison sentence and they will leave and they will go on to live productive lives in society. Interesting fact, if you haven't been out here, is that there's other prison units around this one. There's kind of a prison complex. There's some facilities for women inmates who are booked, and then there's just other buildings all around this one. But this can hopefully give you a closer look into what things are like out here at the Maximum Security Prison. I'm Nate Eaton, reporting in CUNA.